What's up, y'all? This is Matthew from The Rim Review. The Rim Review is a page that offers in-depth player analysis and gives nuance to the way that you watch basketball. In this series, we're going to be going over every single prospect in the upcoming 2026 NBA Draft. And in today's episode, we're going to be looking at one of the most fascinating point guards in this draft, and that is Christian Anderson. First, let's get into Christian Anderson's offensive strengths. When you're watching his film, the most obvious thing that he does incredibly well is his ability to play in pick and roll. He was in the 93rd percentile as a pick and roll ball handler, and he consistently has great reads, whether he's scoring or facilitating. And talking about his facilitating abilities, he was 5th in D1 in assists with 244, so he's not scared at all to, pass to his teammates, something that he was quite successful with at Texas Tech. Thirdly, he not only can, pass the ball, but he's an elite shooter off the dribble. He shot 42% beyond the arc on dribble jumpers, which is something really, really great to see. And then lastly, he's really, really disciplined in the paint, where he's consistently off to, not every single time, something that he can obviously work on, but it's great to see early on. Now going into his offensive weaknesses, there's a few things, especially with Christian Anderson being a smaller point guard, and that is that when he's in the paint, he's going to be bothered by taller defenders, and so he needs to really rely, similar to a guy like Jalen Brunson, where you need to be off to basically every single possession, and that's just something he needs to work on. And another weakness is that sometimes he can't handle pressure with the ball, especially in pick and roll, whether a team's blitzing. He's not able to handle that pressure, and so he had 109 turnovers, which I think was 10th in D1. And then lastly, Christian Anderson doesn't really have an elite quick first step, which is something you do want to note because he heavily relied on pick and roll, which I don't think is the most crazy weakness, but it's something to realize that he can't really he's not a great scorer in isolation alone. Now I want to go into transition. I think 2 or 3 clips. In this first example, I think that's JT Toppin that gets the block, and simply Christian Anderson is going to have an athletic coast-to-coast finish, and so shout out him with the coast-to-coast. He realizes that it's going to be a 2-on-1. Simply Christian Anderson just needs to sprint, go through contact, a little Euro step, draws contact and one. It's impressive. However, it's sometimes a little bit of a worry, especially that he is, a smaller, guard. And so sometimes there's an example like this where Taylor Bowen is guarding Christian Anderson and picks him up in transition. And unfortunately, Christian Anderson's just a little too small. Tries to go off to, tries to be physical, but again, he's a little too small against, forwards and mismatches. Now let's get into pick and roll, something that I've said he does tremendously well and consistently at Texas Tech. So in this first example, I believe that's AJ DeBonsa, where BYU decides to play a little bit of ice, and he just kind of tries to have an athletic finish but isn't able to finish the basket. But there are a few things to note. Firstly, Christian Anderson loves to probe, which I'll show in a little bit. But firstly, in this example, BYU is icing the ball screen, which means that he is allowing Christian Anderson to, basically he doesn't want him to use the ball screen. And so Christian Anderson is going to go to the corner, and they're playing, basically drop coverage, allowing them to switch in this example. And Christian Anderson, doesn't have the greatest finish, but I do love the fact that Anderson is able to probe in this example, where he kind of slows down, changes his pace, and he could have a better finish at the rim, but I think that probing that he does consistently is something to note, and I really, really like that, especially for a smaller guard. You need to figure out really any way you can benefit from your shiftiness. In this example, it's going to be a better finish at the rim, where he is off to, and go fight through contact. And so in this example, Illinois decides to blitz the ball screen, and so he's able to have a quick retreat dribble, go off to through contact, impressive finish. Now we've got about 2 more examples of Christian Anderson with some paint finishes. In this example, Texas Tech does some, ghost action, which I love. And I think it's something really simple you can do, especially at the NBA level. So we see here, Donovan Atwell has the ball, passes it to Christian Anderson, and instead of setting the screen, he's going to basically ghost it, not set the screen, as we see in this example. And Christian Anderson can simply get downhill. And in this example, he does go off too, which is great. But there's 2 ways you can go off too, which is kind of why I wanted to choose this clip as a teaching point. And so he gets downhill and off 2, which is great. But in this example, he's launching off of 2. So instead of being patient and kind of looking at his reads, he launches off 2, which for a more athletic guy, a forward like an AJ DeBonsa, I love it. But for Christian Anderson, a guy that's really, smaller, I don't love the fact that he's launching from going off 2. It's a little bit worrisome. But the fact that he's going off 2 is really, really a point of contention that I do want to say is great. In this example, he doesn't go off 2, and again, as a result, he's off balance. Simply isn't able to get the ball to, JT Toppin, the roll man, forces a turnover. And so, again, I like that he's off 2 consistently, but something that you're gonna need to work on for a guy that's gonna be consistently in pick and roll. Now transitioning into off the bounce threes. This is, I think, his bread and butter. And so we see right here, something that Texas Tech did a ton, especially with LaJon Watts, was twisting their ball screens, which basically means, as we see, LaJon Watts is coming up and setting a screen. And so usually what they do is they last second decide which way they're going to set the ball screen. And so right here, you think that they're going to set a ball screen on the left side of the Alabama defender. Last second, they twist it, and that lets Christian Anderson to get a little bit of space, especially when Alabama is playing deep drop. And for Christian Anderson, a guy that shoots 42% off the bounce, you just can't let that happen. And I think that's just simply his bread and butter. In this example, it's going to be a switch, and although it's not, drop coverage off the bounce, he is, sometimes bothered by, taller defenders. In this example, he has to have a pretty high arc, which I think in this example we can see, I'm not a physics major, but it's a really, really high release point because he sometimes is consistently bothered by taller defenders, in this example against Colorado. Now we're going to be talking about his playmaking, something that I've said is really, really impressive, where in this example we see Christian Anderson going off to, able to get a little dump off to JT Toppin, but he's just simply not bothered. Houston is a really, really great defensive team. In this example, they don't hedge, which they sometimes consistently do, but we see that JT Toppin ghosts the screen, as we've talked about. Y'all should all know about the ghost, but this is really great. With the ghost, Christian Anderson has a quick acceleration, goes off to perfect example where the low man who might have to help, tag, he's not there. All disheveled defense, JT Toppin is able to get an athletic dunk. Another example of playmaking, I think there's a pretty similar example in my Mikel Brown video, which I think Mikel Brown and Christian Anderson are 2 incredible playmaking guards, where they're able to have that recognition. And so in this example, I don't know who is setting the screen. I believe I don't know how to say his last name, but Luke Bamboy. But right now in this example, they set ram pick and roll. So if you don't know what ram pick and roll is, it's that one guy is setting a screen for another guy to set a on-ball screen. And so again, they twist the ball screen, as we've talked about. Christian Anderson is getting downhill. And so in this example, we see they're kind of hedging. It's a soft hedge, but as a result, there's 2 people on the ball. And so simply Luke just can simply dive to the rim, and then this guy, as we've talked about, this defender, is in no man's land. He's either going to need to help tag the defender or stay on Jalen Petty, I believe. And in this example, he's kind of does neither, and it results in a great bucket and a great assist. And then, as I've talked about, I'm in love with Christian Anderson and him using, even though he's small, he uses these tools in this example where he probes. And so, again, we're playing against Arizona with some drop coverage. And so, as a result, Christian Anderson simply probes on Jaden Bradley, gets his butt as a result of such a high pick and roll we see right here. Jaden Bradley decides to try to fight over it. And so as he's fighting over it, Christian Anderson sees that he's behind, and then he can get a lovely pocket pass, short roll to JT Toppin, and that's just butter. And then I think this might be the last example of playmaking, but again, another, great one where in this example, it's going to be, blitz. And so, two examples ago, I believe it was against the hedge. This is going to be against a more aggressive blitz. So it's a side ball screen, and Utah decides to have 2 men on the ball. And as a result, Christian Anderson realizes this and simply, if you're going to be blitzing, you can't have this gap right here. You need both of your guys to be, tight on the ball. And so JT Toppin simply gets a nice pocket pass, floater, easy bucket. My apologies. We've got one more example of a pick and roll playmaking, which I've addressed how he sometimes can't handle pressure. Simply, they blitz the ball screen, and unfortunately, he picks up the ball too early, tries to throw it away. This is just one example, but I think there's about, over 10 of them. And this could be another example of just how he can't really handle pressure. This is just simply applying pressure on ball, and Anderson, doesn't have a strong grip on it and gets ripped. And so he can't really handle that pressure, and it's something you definitely need to focus on, especially if they're going to have to play so much pick and roll, as he really isn't a isolation scorer, as I've talked about. In this example, again, another great Jalen Petty corner 3, but the beauty with it is that in this example, I really like how he keeps his dribble. So JT Toppin sets a screen. Anderson realizes, he's a little too short to, try to play in the paint. And so he kind of has a retreat dribble. I believe that's LeJon Watts, sets another screen. And as a result, this Oklahoma State defender is kind of in no man's land again, has a slow gap. Anderson sees it, kicks out, butter. Now I want to talk about his shooting. Again, he's not really, a stand-still shooter, but he's able to hit these difficult shots, like in this example against Kansas State, where he simply slides away from the ball. And it's just impressive how he's able to get his footing right and, bang an off-balance 3. But sometimes there are going to be times where he's going to be bothered by a contest, especially against taller guys like AJ Devonta in this example. And so, again, as I talked about, his high release point, where it's really so high where he's bothered by these defenders, where in this example, he airballs the shot. And so it's something you do want to note for a guy that's so short. It's not like Mikael Brown, who's 6'5", Christian Anderson's 6'2", 6'3", much shorter, where he, can't really, he's going to be bothered by those taller defenders. Transitioning into isolation, I don't think that Christian Anderson is an incredible, isolation player, but he shows some flashes in this example against Houston, where he has that change of pace and he's on balance, turns on a dime. Really, really impressive. But then there's going to be other examples most of the time where they're playing, Caleb Foster and Duke, where he's just bothered simply by the on-ball pressure and kind of just chucks up a bad shot. I know it's only 3 seconds left in the shot clock, but there are a few examples also against Dame Sar, other solid NBA players, defenders, future NBA defenders, where he's just simply bothered. This example, I believe that's Chris Sinak, and he's playing against a big, and although Sinak bites, Chris Anderson has that patience goes off to floater. That's butter. And so he's able to do pretty solid against bigs, but again, where he's got that high release point where it's going to be, against more athletically vertical players. I'm curious how often his short stature is going to impact his game. Going into dribble handoff situations, I think he does a really, really good job in dribble handoffs where he plays a lot of get game, which was, after action for Texas Tech. So simply, he's going to, since Christian Anderson is really, really good off pick and roll, off DHO, all he simply has to do is pass to one of his bigs, whether it's LeJon Watts or JT Toppin, and simply just pass and then follow in a dribble handoff, tight curl against Malik Thomas, and gets downhill off to draws contact against Trevon Brazile, little foul, get to the free throw line. This example against Wyoming, again, he's got that great probe, and unfortunately in this example, something that I haven't talked about but it's a part of his playmaking game, is that he likes to force it, especially to JT Toppin at the start of the season before he got injured. And unfortunately in this example, you got a free kick out, but instead he just decides to try to pass it, bounce pass to JT Toppin. I don't love it. I'd rather love the paint touch, wide open three over a contested, clogged up paint shot. That's just me personally. But Anderson has this, ridiculousness of, off dribble, steps into a shot. It's really, really impressive, and I just love how incredible of a shooter he is. I think he's a little bit worse than Mikel Brown if we're doing comparisons, but still really, really, really solid. This is last, I believe, one or two examples attacking closeouts where he really has great snap decisions. I don't think it's a ton. There weren't a ton of examples. He really is simply a pick and roll guy, but LSU, bad picture on defense where they're really not matched up at all, and so Anderson realizes that it's gonna be he's got no matchup, and so as a result it's gonna be a late contest. Anderson can simply get downhill, go through contact. It's not off two, but I'm fine with an off one finish. Now let's transition into Christian Anderson's defense. Nothing too crazy, but talking about his defensive strengths, I think he's really, really good at popping back, especially in closeouts. It's going to be the last part of his breakdown, but he does an incredible job. Plenty of examples on it shows too. And then really, really good effort, especially in help. And he does a great job got that awareness, rotates, sprints, helps his teammates out. And I think he's pretty solid on the ball. He was, I believe, in the 70th percentile against isolation. So especially for a smaller guard, he does pretty solid. But unfortunately, there are going to be some weaknesses, especially the fact that he does struggle off the ball. And so he consistently does lose his man, and he was in the 33rd percentile in off-screen defense. And so there are a lot of times where opposing offenses decided to just pick on him, and he couldn't really do anything about it. Also, he's a shorter guard, and so he sometimes struggles with physicality, although it's not a ton. There are some times, again, where he can kind of get picked on, especially I wouldn't be surprised in the NBA if that happens. And then in the pick and roll, he's kind of hit or miss coverage-wise, but I think that's more going to be on the coaching of Texas Tech. Now I want to go into some on-ball examples first. So I think he is pretty solid. I'm going to go with this first example where he just simply walls up, body between, vertical, pretty good example. Again, as I've talked about this a ton, I like this picture where you simply just have your hands up, but unfortunately he doesn't get he allows an offensive rebound, but that kind of is going to happen as he's, again, such a smaller guard. This next example, great elite defense, especially at popping back, and so I love his ability to simply pop back. He isn't afraid of change of directions, body between, and the UCF player just simply loses the ball through that contact against Anderson. But I think another example in this game against the same UCF player is that sometimes he does have some choppy feet, and so similar to his pick and roll defense, sometimes he's a little hit or miss on ball. But I think a majority of the time he is does a good job with that popping back. And so in this example, he's going against Kingston Flemings, a fellow point guard, probably going in the, he's going to be going in the first round, just of a matter of, where he gets, drafted. But one-on-one defense, Houston's pretty much cleared out isolation, but the fact that Anderson is able to have a pop back and then realizes Christian Anderson is going to be spinning, picks up his dribble. Anderson vertical forces a miss, although they get an offensive rebound for Houston. He just is, he's pretty consistent, and so I think the main thing is that against taller guys, in this example against Andre Stojakovic, he's going to get bullied, and I think that's just the fact of the matter, where if they do, switch in the NBA, wherever team drafts him, he's gonna struggle for sure. But a majority of the time, I think he can kind of stay on his own. Going into pick and roll, I think this is against Braden Burries, where he's just kind of thrown off by the ghost and kind of out of the play. Nothing, too scary. Sometimes you just need to have better communication with your teammates. And in that example, he didn't do a great job. But in this example against Houston, maybe Milo Suzan, pretty good job at, with the screen navigation and warring. And so we see, I believe, Joseph Tugler setting a screen. The fact that Christian Anderson, fights through the screen, isn't bothered by that hesitation, and, simply got the body in between, stays low. You just, good example in pick and roll defense. In this example, I think it's solid defense with the navigation, but unfortunately CJ Cox hits a little, pump fake, and I think there were two examples later in the game as well where, good navigation by Anderson. Trey Kaufman-Moran doesn't set a ridiculous hard setting screen, but allows Anderson to fight through the screen, but unfortunately is just, bothered and falls for the, pump fake. It's just a bad recovery, something that you can easily prevent by just being more disciplined, realizing that you're going to have your teammate LeJon Watts, helping you on defense in the pick and roll coverage. You don't have to, fall for a pump fake. Now going into off-ball defense, in this example, he wars, and I think it's really good, but this is probably the best example of him off-ball, where he does do a good job. Joseph Tugler is, dribble handoff, and so Christian Anderson fights through that screen, but unfortunately, at the end of this play, he doesn't stay vertical enough and, causes a foul. But a majority of the other times, in these other examples off the ball, he simply just loses his man. And so as TCU swings the ball to the other side, Christian Anderson, realizes I'm low man, I'm going to stay at the block. But he doesn't really recognize that they're kind of setting, a stagger action. And unfortunately, he's just out of the play, tries to cheat it. Because he's out of the play, tries to, cheat both screens, but he's just a little too late. And I think it really happens every time. And so it's just the unfortunate reality where I think TCU kind of realized that, hey, we can kind of pick on number 4, we can pick on Anderson because he's not really a great off-ball defender. So in this example, we see he's at the bottom of the screen, and they're simply going to be setting a pin down. Very simple action. This is the first play of the game, and unfortunately, this is just kind of with Texas Tech's defense. They aren't really helping, and LeJon Watts doesn't really stunt at the ball whatsoever. And so it's simply, a simple pin down results in, not bad navigation from Anderson, but simply a lack of help from his fellow teammates. And so as a result, Anderson's behind the play, gets no help from Watts, and it's a free layup. But there are, Obviously some good examples. We saw him in low man 2 examples ago with TCU, where he's behind the play. But in this example, as the low man, Cam Boozer throws a bad turnover, and Anderson has this awareness. I'm a low man. I'm guarding Malik Brown, but I'm going to be up the floor. Very vocal on defense, and he simply steals it from a pass towards Nick Kaminya. Similar to that previous example where Christian Anderson had a really, really good, awareness, as the low man. In this example, kind of gambles. I do, again, like his awareness. Pretty much the same picture where he is, mismatched and the low man, and he's got that, awareness, tries to gamble, but he's not fully up the floor. And so maybe if he was, a foot, higher, he maybe could have gotten that, but I just don't love that. I'd rather just have a simple closeout, stick on the ball. Don't have to be too fancy. He's kind of just out of the play, unfortunately. This is what I love though, with Anderson on defense, and it's that he just simply has great effort. And so in this example, we see that they decide to, against Oklahoma State, they decide to double. And so Christian Anderson, after they don't have a dribble. Usually, coaches will decide, hey, first dribble, we will, either double from the other block or the elbow. In this example, Anderson tries to double, not even before the first, dribble, and as a result, he quickly sprints back, stays on the ball. Just a beautiful example where he has that awareness. He was taught well, but there's a lot of times where you've got a great coach, but the players don't have that awareness. In this example, again, another great example where he sprints for the rotate. And so, again, same picture where they're going to double, have 2 men on the ball. And so Anderson realizes this, and even before the ball is thrown, you can see through Anderson's face, he realizes that it's going to be a pass back to where the double came from. Great effort, although it's a made 3. It's really bad. It's really more on Watts that he's low. He should probably be at the elbow, but just great effort from Christian Anderson. Something that I just love to see, that he just consistently has good effort. This is going to be a last example of help where he's in the gaps. Good solid gap, great closeout, forces a really, really bad miss by Eagle staff. And it's just the little things that you're able to do help defense, whether you're not a great off the ball, but you can simply contribute through help. The 2 final examples we're going to be going through are going to be closeout situations. So in this example against Wake Forest, Nate Calmise gets a paint touch, kicks it to Miles Colvin in the corner. But I'm in love with Christian Anderson's ability to pop back, stay vertical, get a contest, bad miss. Although, the Marcus Marion, Wake Forest player number 11, gets an offensive rebound. I'm in love with the fact that Anderson has a good pop back. This next example is going to be even a better example of a pop back where he's not afraid to be physical with a smaller size, and so forces an air ball. But I'm just in love with the fact that he just has good effort, good instincts, through closeouts. Something really, really small, but there are a lot of players that are hurt significantly by the fact that they're just undisciplined. Christian Anderson is not that. So when talking about Christian Anderson overall, I think he's probably going to fall around the mid-first round. I think there's a chance he could be late lottery, but in my eyes, more mid-first round. And when I'm thinking about it, just overall, I think Christian Anderson is simply a poor man's Mikel Brown. Simply, comparing point guards, Christian Anderson's not a top 3 point guard, but he's going to be really, really good value Anderson obviously is shorter, and he does heavily rely on pick and rolls, but I don't think that's something to be worried about. He does a great job in pick and roll. He obviously 93rd percentile, over 1 point per possession, and he's a really, really, really talented shooter. Defensively, the fact that nothing sticks out, that it's like a huge red flag, is going to be a green flag for these point guards. And simply the fact that in the modern NBA, in this league, there's just such a dominated heavy use of pick and roll, and the fact that Anderson really isn't going to have a crazy transition from college to the league is something that I think NBA GMs should consider. And I think he really is going to be a great guard. If you're a team that's in the playoffs and want to invest in a point guard, you don't have obviously the draft capital to get a guy like Acuff or Mikael Brown or Wagler, Flemings, whatever. I think Christian Anderson is a great possible pick for whatever team you are. So with that being said, I greatly appreciate you watching another episode of the Rim Review. If you have any other players you want me to go through, please let me know. I'm going to be grinding out a bunch now that I've fully gotten it in the summer. So I appreciate y'all so much, and until next time, see you later.